Canada's only terpene manufacturer. Hi, I'm Katie Miller. Welcome to Flow Scientific. We are Canada's only terpene manufacturer and here to meet all the needs of our licensed processor customers across the country with our high quality and compliant terpene products. Hope to see you soon.
Oh, hello and welcome. Welcome to the Women in Leadership panel. My name is Bridget Hoffer, and I'm just very excited to be here and with this amazing group of women. So if it's all right with you, I think we'll just start by going around and starting with an overview from each of you. How about an introduction? We've got an incredible lineup. So we're just waiting for a couple of folks here. So I think Vivian is coming on. But Kyra, let's start with you.
Hi, thanks so much for having me, Bridget and Katie. This is just such an incredible conference. I'm so honored to be part of it. My name is Kyra Reed. I'm the founder of Women Empowered in Cannabis. We are a global community for women working in cannabis, and we help women build their networks, provide resources, find the resources that they need, whether it's in their career or building their business, and really give them a place that is theirs, that shows support and enables women to really kind of have the kind of environment that they really can thrive in, where they're not having to mansplain anything or justify what they're doing, where they can get the help that they need and not feel ashamed for doing so, or as if things are out of their reach. So our goal really is to help equalize the field for women.
Thank you, Kyra. And are you in California today?
I am in California.
Okay, yeah. It's wonderful. So let's go over to Wendy, a fabulous documentary producer, and let's hear a little bit about you. Thanks for your intro, Kyra.
Hi, everyone. My name is Wendy Borman. I'm the director of the award-winning documentary, Mary Jane's The Women of Weed. So I'm actually outside of the cannabis industry, but I'm really excited to be here today because I feel like I learned a lot of wonderful, valuable lessons about women in leadership from the women that I interviewed in the film. And I can't wait to hear from all the wonderful panelists today. And it's great to see some familiar faces too.
Great, welcome. Great. And you know, it's wonderful to have the outside in and inside out point of view, and your film is fabulous, and we'll come back to you to talk to you a little bit more about that. Katie Miller, it's so wonderful to see you. I loved your little promo at the start. Tell us about Flow and a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah. Good to be here. Thanks so much, Bridget. Nice to see you again. My name is Katie Miller. I do sales and business development for Flow Scientific. That's a very new video that we got produced just a few weeks ago. So thank you. You're the first audience. Sneak peek, nothing compared to Wendy's work. But we are a humble Canadian terpene manufacturer. We try to arrive at the threshold of commercial industrial supply. We have a very strong quality management system and a suite of compliance documents and professionals that also support our products. And we supply a number of the licensed processors, most specifically with their Cannabis 2.0 and soon to be 3.0 products to market. Myself, personally, I have a master's in leadership that I completed in 2017. And before entering the cannabis community was a public servant up here in Canada doing fundraising for education mostly. However, all of those skills transferred. And so I went from fundraising for dollars to support public systems to now selling terpenes and really getting to feel like I'm moving the dial in women's leadership. So really happy to be on this esteemed panel.
Great. Welcome. And welcome, Vivian, and welcome, Myrna. Vivian, are you ready to do your introduction to the panel?
Hi, everyone. My name is Vivian Wilson, the founder of Greenport. We're a retail cannabis store located in Toronto. We're also federally licensed to sell cannabis across Canada and import and export as well. For us, it's about really trying to celebrate the history of the cannabis plant, making sure that we recognize the people who introduced this plant to the world, and try to push for change in the industry to ensure that some of the underrepresented groups, especially those that have been criminalized for the use of cannabis, actually are able to fairly participate within this industry. So it's been especially during COVID and being a retailer, it's definitely been a huge learning process, tons of changes, and that's what we've continuously had to adjust to over the past year or so. Is just one thing has been consistent is the amount of change that's gone on in the world and in the industry as well.
Thank you. Okay, great intro. And over to Myrna. Like we've got like all of North America covered here right now. So East Coast, West Coast, Central. Myrna, welcome.
Yes, hello from Atlantic Canada and the East Coast. My name is Myrna Gillis, and I am the CEO and founder of Aqualitas, and we are a vertically integrated cannabis cultivator and processor, and we use a unique aquaponic process and are an organically certified producer and processor here. And a big part of our sort of value proposition is also about sustainability and obviously supporting diversity in the workplace. Before coming into the cannabis space in 2017, I practiced law as a disabilities advocate for 25 years. And so I come to the space from the perspective of disabilities advocacy as well as social justice, which was mentioned by one of my colleagues just a moment ago as well. This is something that I'm quite passionate about.
Wonderful, wonderful. And a bit of my background, I'm a partner and founder of Marigold PR, and thrilled to have all of you women here today to talk about leadership and what it means. My background is in media and communications, and I support a lot of the client and strategic development over at Marigold. I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to talk to all of you, because just going around the table, the virtual table that we're sitting at right now, there's an incredible range of experience, and we're going to dive in and talk a little bit about what it means to be a leader, and what it means to think about building a leadership team and landscapes and obstacles to overcome, etc. So I'm going to turn it to Kyra first and just ask her a question about how do we demonstrate the power and importance of collaboration for women in the cannabis industry, Kyra?
So in the last 3.5 years that I've been running Women Empowered in Cannabis, one of the things that is most painfully evident is that women are not getting the funding that they need, and in abysmally low numbers. And I can't really solve that problem within Women Empowered in Cannabis. I'm not really sure how to solve that problem. But what I've realized is that through the act of collaboration, which is supporting each other where I am strong and another is weak and vice versa, that we can actually begin the process of lifting each other up together. And we may, every one of us runs into this brick wall at some point in our business where we basically, everything that we've built and worked for, we have to go beg a man to give us money and say, hey, you're valid enough to have this company. We will bestow upon you our money so that you can continue. And that is not the position a lot of women who are building their businesses want to be in. So if we actually can join forces and help each other by removing one of those bricks at a time, I have marketing skills. You need a little bit of help with your marketing to get over the hump. And instead of having to go borrow $30,000, maybe we can do something together where what you do can benefit me and what I can do can benefit you. And I really think, we're not going to solve all of our problems by doing that, but I think that we can change the landscape of this industry and get more women ahead if we do it together through collaboration. And we have been doing a collaboration, for instance, with Tokativity. We've created a whole new event series called House of Jane and the Women in Plant Medicine Summit. And we do this as a team together. We bring everything we have to bear to the table, and we go in 50%. We haven't formed a new company. We haven't, hired people. We haven't gone through the process of doing that. It's just a collaboration between our two companies because our goals are aligned and we are different enough that our audiences are supportive of each other, and we can create really great things together because our two companies together bring more experience, more talent, and more ability to get those deliverables done. So there's a lot of ways that you can collaborate with other women, and I highly recommend doing so. If you are stuck in a place where you really need funding and can't get the money that you need, start calling the women in your circle and saying, hey, can you do a trade with me? I will help you with this if you can help me with this. We've got to start lifting each other up and being willing to do that if we are going to change this industry for women.
Thanks, Kyra. So lifting each other up, finding ways to collaborate, finding ways to find resources, and really sharing a movement coming together. Wendy, when you were creating Women of Weed and the suffragettes, etc. How did you see that working? Did you see that collaboration happening in the cannabis space, or do we have a long way to go as leaders, women leaders?
Well, the short answer is yes to both. I mean, we were in an interesting position because I was producing a documentary about the cannabis industry. So the funders for our documentary not only had to understand the value of women in film, they also needed to understand the value of a film about women in the cannabis industry, and then the value of the illegal and regulated cannabis industry. So I found myself in a unique funding position to try to explain all those three variables to our funders. And luckily we were able to
go?
Well, the film is finished, so
yeah,
exactly. It went well enough.
Yeah.
But that said, I had to educate people along the way, and I feel like women filmmakers and women in the cannabis find themselves having to educate their funders as well. I still feel like there's conversations that need to be had about this. It's interesting that we started filming the documentary before the Me Too movement. So we were filming in 2016, and when multiple states voted to legalize cannabis. And so it didn't necessarily change our storytelling, but it changed our call to action. We were ahead of the curve in a lot of ways in trying to make the case for why women-led stories about women could be marketable for everyone. And we were also ahead of the curve for why the cannabis industry was the intersection for core values such as gender equity, social justice, and environmental sustainability. And that's how I decided who to feature in the film. It was a wonderful problem to have as a filmmaker that I could have kept interviewing women because there's so many amazing, remarkable women with incredible stories. But at some point, we needed to stop filming and get the film out in the world so that way it could really do the work and help support the leaders in the work that they're doing. If the film it's available now, we released it in this April actually. But if it can be a reason for people to show up and pay attention at an event to help leaders elevate the conversations that they need to have for their businesses, they could use it as a fundraiser. I mean, there's all sorts of calls to action that can come out of a social justice documentary. So that's my hope, that as much as the film is kind of a time capsule of some of the leaders at a key point in time, we didn't magically solve these issues around gender, social justice, and sustainability. So hopefully we can collaborate to do that together.
Okay, so that's the connecting theme, right? Collaboration, raising up, moving things forward. And I guess some of that goes back to the kind of team as women leaders that we build and grow and cultivate. Myrna, did you want to comment on what you look for when you're building teams at Aqualitas? And what do you wish more women in cannabis understood about collaborations or know about collaborations as we go down that path?
Sure. So two things. I always like to say, be the change you want to see. So for us in our company, diversity was a very important thing to us. We have about 100 employees. 2/3 of our directors are women, 50% of our managers are women, and 42% of our frontline staff are women. This is a real demonstrative, indication that you can have a very diverse workplace with respect to gender. but it's also diverse with respect to racial and religious and First Nations, Aboriginal, LGBTQ, and we're creating a culture of that type of diversity. And part of how you build that team is you need to put out into the world what your value is and what your value proposition is. So your values and what you value. And as part of that, you will also draw in people that are attracted to that kind of culture, that kind of workplace. And so we look for, obviously highly skilled people that are able to contribute to the team. So subject matter expertise, but also just a respect for what we're trying to do and diversity in our workplace. On the collaboration side of things, I think that collaboration needs to be seen as a continuum, because we don't just collaborate with people that we do business with. We have to collaborate with our communities as a whole. And so that is what makes us authentic, because if we work with, for example, during COVID, we did a campaign for the vulnerable populations that were impacted by COVID. So homelessness, people that were fleeing domestic violence, people with invisible disabilities, which, on the face of it, have no direct, networking or collaboration with our company, but it's part of the support of who we want to be in the community. So I think collaboration is not only do we collaborate in concentric circles with the companies that we do business with. So, if I have an opportunity to hire a woman in a company that is led in marketing or in retail, collaborate with companies like that, or advocates or sales forces, that's what we do. And so that's part of the collaboration, but it's also collaboration with our communities in authentic ways that we are supporting the leadership of good people in what they're doing, and recognizing, that diversity is important, and our support of it isn't just in relation to networking that's got a proximity to our own business.
Okay. I mean, I really like your, I like your be the change that you want to see, and, value what you value. And then of course, translating that into what's going on in terms of those concentric circles of community. I'm just going to turn it over to Katie at Flow. We're talking about collaborating, we're talking about trying to find money, we're trying to find about support. In your arc from a young startup to art enterprise, tell us about some of the obstacles that you've had to overcome in this startup and that leadership role.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, startup is tough, and cannabis being a nascent industry with no history makes it a little bit tougher. So challenges were looking for us, seemingly. Oppression was looking for us. Disadvantage was looking for us. And so personally, for me, my angle to overcome that, being that I'm female and very rarely have money, is to build relationships and to create power through those relationships. And that often comes with enrolling people in a particular vision and being so dogged and disciplined about my own values that it's there's no uncertainty in what you're going to get from me. It's a commitment to values. It's a delivering on my commitment. And I'm going to serve you the best I can and be kind in the process. And so that I have found has been able to generate power that is able to overcome very significant obstacles, such as growing a cannabis adjacent startup in a pandemic.
Okay, with a focus on terpenes and
yes,
making it all happen. And speaking, and when we think about what we've been going through in terms of the pandemic, we have to turn over to Vivian and really think about what's been going on. It's been a year of change in retail with many implications that have impacted cannabis retail. What has stood out for you, Vivian, that you could share with us from a leadership perspective for retailers, and how will this shape the future post-COVID?
Well, I think a lot of the retailers went in the industry feeling very confident about, based on the numbers that we were seeing, based on the projections that were being made. And COVID put a real damper on a lot of that. A lot of those projections have been thrown out, period. A lot of them were overestimated to begin with, and COVID just really, I think, made it more realistic, but then really painted it really changed the dynamics of the way that the industry is going to run going forward, I think. And from a retail perspective, what I found the most interesting and what was the most disappointing for me was our store was built on community and was built on making sure that everyone feels represented and had access to education, we were celebrating the history of so many people who introduced this plant to the world and making sure that they felt recognized. And we had to pivot. We had to minimize our interaction with our community, changed completely. And so one of the greatest lessons I learned within maneuvering the pandemic is the fact that, and I think it goes back to what Meryl had said, that building the community doesn't start just with people within your own industry. The reliance on our neighboring stores, bars, and restaurants really impacted the flow of our neighborhood. I'm in the Little Italy neighborhood in Toronto, and because our bars, restaurants, clubs, everything has been shut down for the last year, we've seen a significant reduction in the amount of people coming out, period. And so I've had to really understand in that moment how important it is to work with the community and to work with the other businesses within the community, because we are reliant on their success. If their consumers are coming in to shop, they'll likely see the Greenport store and vice versa. So we did a lot of collaboration with local businesses within the area, with the business getting connected with the BIA. So that's the business information group for Little Italy, and making sure that all of the other local businesses know that we're there to support them. And through that, we are developing a community access page where we're going to start showcasing and highlighting other businesses within the area to make sure that, because we're going through a very similar challenge right now from a retail perspective, and it became, how do we lift each other up in this very difficult time? So we're looking at different opportunities and ways that we could showcase all the other businesses within the area and in other communities as well, because right now it's really important that we support local businesses and we help to build each other up from a community perspective, from a business perspective. But most importantly, it's just the way I think that's going to be a shift that's going to have to be ongoing, especially to get us out of this very difficult economic and financial time. And we're happy I'm very thankful to have learned that lesson very early on and be able to utilize that knowledge that we now have.
Amazing. Thank you for that insight, because that really kind of ties everything together that we've been talking about for the first part of this conversation, in terms of the community, the adjacencies, working together. I'm going to turn it back to Kyra and talk to her, ask her a little bit about, before this, in some of the notes preparing, we talked about what women need to understand to better navigate as leaders, and just women in general, the cannabis industry. And you talked about knowing your niche and researching. What does that mean? What can you share with us on that?
So understanding your drilled down audience, there are a lot of, especially in the States, I can't really speak to what's happening in Canada, but there are a lot of women who are drawn to this industry because it has changed their life. It has, healed their children or made them able to live in the world, even though they have had severe accidents and trauma and pain. So it's provided a miracle for a lot of women. They then decide, I want to work in this industry. I want to be part of making cannabis available to everyone. But they don't really have a tremendous amount of experience building a business, which is hard enough in any industry. Then you add all of the cannabis regulations and nuances on top of it, and it gets even harder. And what we find is a lot of people coming to the industry with no experience in marketing. So they want to try to be everything to all people. But the truth is, you've got to really figure out, based on your values, who your audience is and niche it way down into a small group so that you can speak directly to them and tailor your product specifically to them. We see so many products that just, they're the same ingredients and you just slap a different label on and now it's for golf or now it's for women or, and that's not what it's about. It's about really tailoring your product to the needs of that niche and then really delivering the best that you can to that niche. And there is so much opportunity in this industry. We're moving towards federal legalization. We have more states every year that are coming on and becoming legal for adult use. This means that the amount of opportunity that people have to dig into a niche is incredible because there isn't a lot of that happening right now. So I highly recommend that women really just, you narrow in on, exactly who it is that you want to service, and then build your entire business around making sure that you are meeting the needs of or increasing something in the life of that person you're selling those products to.
Yeah, exactly. Like knowing your audience, knowing how you're going to reach them with the right product and right message. So when we're thinking about documentary making, Wendy, and looking at that path, who has impacted you and helped you shape the way you think about the cannabis industry?
Well, honestly, I can say I don't think I would have made this film if I had not met women in the cannabis industry. So the reason I became intrigued to create the Mary Janes, the Women of Weed, was I moved to Colorado in 2014, and that was right when the state legalized cannabis. And I started seeing and hearing stories of women having success in the industry. The statistic at the time was 36% of senior leadership in the cannabis industry was women. And I know from the film industry, it's like 20%. And if you look at other industries like finance, it's even more. So there was something about cannabis that drew a lot of women, as Kyra said. And I think I struggled personally, just because I had really absorbed a lot of the propaganda around cannabis. I mean, we called it marijuana when I was in school, and they considered that a gateway drug. Well, there's drug addiction in my family, and I never wanted to tempt the genetics. So I had never tried it before. But I realized that if all of these women were having success and they were able to connect these dots for me to show me how cannabis was a way for women to build and create companies where they could pay themselves the same as a man, right? They could build generational wealth in communities that have been disproportionately affected by the war on drugs. If it can help, veterans and children and just average people, and we can make it more sustainable because we don't have to use oil-based plastic. We can use hemp-based packaging. Like, they connected all of these dots for me. So even though this was my first film about cannabis, I realized
Okay, we have a little freeze here. Okay, I hope Wendy comes back on. Myrna, I'm just going to quickly turn it over to you. We were talking about relationships.
Obviously.
Oh, there we are. Hi, Wendy.
Oh, sorry.
Hi, Wendy.
Hi.
We lost you for a little bit there.
Oh no, I know. Do you want me to keep going? What was the last thing you heard?
I think we were good. I think where we heard you get to was like the impact of women and where we were and moving that forward. So I was going to flip it over to Myrna and ask her about how to build out that relationship. Thanks, Wendy.
I think part of the relationship building for me anyway is I like to go. The first relationships and people that you look to leadership are the people that are closest to you. So, I mean, obviously, my mother and my sisters were the first sort of formative leadership that I had seen. And then the women that I worked with in my company and then in the sort of the communities. But some important relationships, I think, outside of defining, your personal ones and those in your workplace is identifying sort of champions that you want to support and support you. And the best way to build a relationship is actually to be giving of yourself and your own time. Very often, what people really want is to be listened to, and to have a place where they can share some of their vulnerabilities and challenges in a way that they know that information will be held in confidence, and that they can trust you. Those are sort of the formative building blocks of any relationship. And so for us, we went out into sort of different areas and tried to build relationships. For example, one of the things that was commented on was financing. I raised $35 million in equity and financing, non-brokered. I didn't have a broker house. I didn't have any of those things. And it started with those small relationships of people that trusted you, and you built out that as you hit your milestones and your deliverables, and you increase your credibility, your capacity to have that trust in relationships outside of your small circle grows that way. So that would be sort of an example where we really did sort of build credibility by delivering and hitting the milestones we said we were, and that helped. In the innovation and academic communities, we went out and we worked with the universities, and so whether it was and we started again close to home until we went to the broader university and academic communities, till we went to the government funders like the National Research Council of Canada, and we started with a small grant of $5,000, working our way up to $2 million in research support. So I think that what you have to do is take small bites in your relationship building, and start with the place that you have the greatest strength and support. And that is how your credibility and your network and your relationships build from that. But if you go without having all of those building blocks in place and say, please write me a check for $5 million, you're not going to get it. But what you do, so you have to be very patient in how you do these things. And in a relationship professionally is no different than a relationship is personally. You have to give and take, and it takes time to build up that trust and respect and reciprocation.
Yeah, and deliver. It sounds like you're delivering, because
you have to,
because every little small bite you're taking, you're getting paid back for those efforts and those values.
Absolutely.
Katie, I wanted to ask you. We're talking a lot about values and what's important, and what core values helped you avoid as you now have covered the values that helped you avoid and build as you navigate the industry.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Myrna. I love having a values conversation. I definitely see myself as a values-based leader. And I think as a number of the panelists have also mentioned, I think there's a certain aspect of blue ocean that was made available at the start of certainly a federally regulated marketplace in Canada for women to step in and say, certainly what attracted me to the space was that opportunity to step in and say, I'm going to do this my way, not a certain way, not the female way, not the Katie way, but just whatever it was that worked for me. And so I think holding my core values strong has really helped with that, and being really intentional about it. I was kind of restructuring my values personally, which I recommend everybody does, and get really, clear about what it is that is important to you, because it affects and impacts your decision making. And the quicker and the more pressure or stress we're under when we make decisions can sometimes have us, perceiving or interpreting information in ways that maybe are a little bit surface and not quite at the discernment level of what our core values are telling us. And so the one I will share is curiosity was one that I really leaned into because I believe it creates a growth mindset. And my whole life has been around constant change. And I don't think any of us will ever be able to sit comfortably in controlling or limiting change. But if you can reframe it to growth, then it's something you can lean into and really participate in fact, lead yourself through the exercise of what you need to uncover.
Great. Okay. So curiosity and moving forward. We've got a couple questions from the audience from Vivian. And so I'm going to ask you two questions, Vivian. First of all, one of the members of the audience was, what advice would you give to the underrepresented women of color in the cannabis business who want to start their business and be leaders? And then we'll touch a little bit on how we can right the wrongs of criminalizations. But I'm just throwing that one out to you right now.
I would say to know what it is that know your product inside out, but also, or know the service that you want to offer inside out. But also understand the industry that you're coming into. It's not something that is immediate. It took me, I think, around a year of getting to know the people in the industry, going to different events when before pre-legalization in Canada, I mean, a lot of the LPs were throwing a significant amount of events. And you were able to attend them freely. So I attended as many events that I could, and I saw what was going on, and I saw how, and it was easy to understand how the industry was going to play itself out when you were at these events and seeing the people who were there. And so I took that aspect of it, but also built on it through my own studies of the regulations and my understanding of the regulations and how those were going to play out in Canada. So I knew the types of challenges or barriers that I was going to come up against because of how the regulations were being written and the people who were at the table writing these regulations. So it's easy to predict the kind of challenges that I was going to come up against. But one of the things and even with funding, I know there is a lot of discussion about funding, but for me, I independently funded my company. And that became the natural route for me to go because I don't have the contacts to get in front of to get at any table to ask for the funds. But it actually worked out to be a better experience because I was able to create what it is that I needed to create. I was able to create something that was more authentic to me and to the community members that I would be representing or hopefully speaking, amplifying their voices. And so I'm not restricted in the things that I'm able to do and how we grow and expand or the message that we deliver through Greenport. And so not having that funding dramatically improved the benefit or the experiences that I'm having, the experience that my team is having working with me, because we're able to be authentic, we're able to be ourselves, we're able to be as real as we possibly can. And no amount of money is worth not being able to have that benefit. The other thing that I did was I traveled outside of Canada. The industry in Canada, I mean, is obvious, is extremely dominated by a very particular group, white, wealthy men coming in from other industries. So that was obvious. So I actually left Canada and went back to Jamaica, went back to my roots, so to speak, to connect with a lot of the grassroots ganja growers within that country to kind of reconnect back to the purpose of why I wanted to be a part of this industry to begin with. And it's through those networks in Jamaica where I met people like Ross Ivy, who's been an activist for 50 years for the rights of the Rastafari community within Jamaica, or Michelle Dumais, who's been advocating in Arizona for the last 10 years for her child to be able to have access for her seizures and all of the multiple health benefits that her child was receiving from the plant. And so these were people that I didn't even meet in Canada. These were people I met outside. And it's through that community that I got a very holistic, I would say, understanding of what people before me have been pushing for, and how do I continue to make sure that I can support them and amplify their voices as I move forward and continue to do great work to make sure that they're able to benefit from the industry as it's shifting and changing, was something that I learned and benefited from, but I didn't get that here in Canada. So that's my advice is the connections that you make don't have to be within the country that you're in. The people don't even have to live here because neither of them even live here. They're outside. But it gave me a completely new and holistic view as to where I would like Greenport to go and how the vision for the company and the organization. And that view helped to keep me motivated, I would say, and keep me pushing forward for what it is that we're trying to do, regardless of all of the, as I mentioned, the disadvantages that I was seeing in the industry and how it was going to be playing itself out. Knowing that I'm doing something that connects back to community, connects back to the people before me who put the work out to get me here, made it more rewarding in the end to be here. And then COVID hit, it's still going,
Exactly.
it's still going through it. So there's been a lot of rough days, I would say, trying to, as we shift, I'm sure all of us can understand what that's like right now, but you take the motivation where you can. And I'm glad that because we had set a solid foundation for what we wanted to do with Greenport, where I wanted to be, where I wanted to see the company going, it allowed me to keep motivated even during this very difficult time.
Amazing. I mean, just the fact, just looking at, again, it's that inside out perspective that we've heard from Wendy, we've heard from Kyra, we were all kind of sharing that overview. I just wanted to touch on one point that you'd raised earlier in our notes, Vivian, which was about how do we right the wrongs of criminalizations on plant-based medicine? I know that you wanted to touch on that a little bit.
Well, and I think that, I think the only way we can do that is to first acknowledge that it happens. Yeah. And to also acknowledge that there are very particular groups that are targeted because of the war on drugs, because of the criminalization of plant-based medicine. And so when we take our audiences or people who know Greenport and the message that we deliver, we celebrate the history of this plant. And we recognize the people who actually brought this plant into the world. We're talking about a plant that has 2,000 years history. And for me, what I was seeing was that the history of this plant was starting in 2018 when Canada legalized it, or some of the other European countries were legalizing it. And I want us to understand that this is just a tiny piece of what has happened. There's 2,000 years of history with this plant and 2,000 years of communities being persecuted and criminalized for their utilization of this plant. And it's also very important to understand that a lot of the medical benefits that we're now researching isn't new. This is information that has been brought to us from all of these communities for thousands of years. It's been documented in their spiritual scriptures, in what would be their pharmacopoeia, in their medical documents. So we are within the current North America, European landscape. We're taking this knowledge and we're packaging it, we're rebranding it, and in a way claiming it for ourselves. And that's unfair and that's unfair if we don't recognize that there was a deep rooted history before, and a lot of people sacrificed, and a lot of people's history and legacy have been destroyed and uprooted because of the criminalization of this plant. And I can relate that personally with my own grandmother, who planted her own 2 ganja plants in our yard, but none of us knew about it because of her fear of, and she knew the benefits of this plant because she was, she never went to the doctor as, she had 10 children and all delivered by her own mother. And so, of course, if there was pain, as we all know through childbirth, there was something being used, but it wasn't anything from the pharmacy. So it would have had to have been some type of plant-based medicine that they were using at this for her to deliver 10 children over these however many years, because they were like back to back over the last 10 years. And she knew the benefit of the plant, but she didn't teach any of us out of fear of us being criminalized for our association with the plant. And so that history, that knowledge eventually died with her. And that's the type of things that I want to highlight, is that this knowledge was already there. we're just now monetizing it and taking advantage of it. And in order for me to be comfortable with what I'm doing, I need to know and I need to share that history and recognize and make sure that others are aware of it as well.
Okay, that's incredible insight. And you know, when you think about that lost legacy and lost traditions and taking advantage of it, you know, we're all in agreement with you. So thank you for bringing that forward, Vivian. I'm going to turn it over to Kyra from California and just ask, you know, when you when you listen to Vivian's story, and then when you think about setting examples for yourself, what does the ideal cannabis industry look like for you, Kyra, as a leader?
That's a good question, and honestly, one that I struggle with a little bit, because you get really caught up in the fight. You know, there's just the number of phone calls I receive where women are telling me that their companies have been taken away from them from their investors, or they've been pushed out, or they can't get the money they need. So it feels at times like it's just a nonstop fight. And really thinking about what that could look like it's hard to think of an industry. I mean, just think, we're in an industry where 40% of women are being funded. Or the funding that's going out is going to 40% of women, right? That I can't, my mind cannot even really compute what that would look like. That women of color are getting 20, 30% of funding. That's a world that we all want, but it's hard to really think about it, because when women are running the show, when women are getting funded, when women's businesses are thriving, it means they're hiring more women and people of color. It means that they're having, according to statistics, less turnover, higher return on investment, and happier employees. So we're looking at a world where we could actually have people that love their jobs and businesses that treat them humanely and with respect and pay them what they deserve to be paid. That is really what I would love to see and what I'm fighting so hard for. But it's a little hard to imagine, to be quite honest. It's not something we've really ever seen, but that's what we're in it for a better life for everyone in this industry. And the way to do that is to advance women and people of color.
Okay, amazing. I've got time for a couple more questions here. I'm going to quickly jump over to Myrna, because Myrna, what you were talking about, you know, with Aqualitas is really trying to look at if there's any economic development. I mean, you did touch a little bit on that, but listening to being authentic, listening to women, listening to funding, listening to where you're building. Do you have any sort of last words? I'm going to touch on you, and then Wendy and Katie to wrap it up.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we've all sort of followed the messaging that companies that have diverse boards or leadership are more successful. But there's a little bit more to it than that I think we need to also look through the lens of economic development, and who is our biggest regulator, and who has the biggest potential to impact the things that are keeping us down. And that's government. I mean, if you look at access to funding, you look at you know, even publicly traded companies, all of these are regulated industries. And so I think that you know, when you look at the EDC and BDC and things that are underwritten by you know, by government agencies, one of the things that they have to start to put into the criteria when advancing companies in business is that they need a checklist, you know. And I think that what we need to have is the things that need to be assessed are diversity, sustainability, working conditions, safety. And those are all of the things, when you look at all of the things that support most of the economic infrastructure of this world, those are things that don't even get a passing glance when access to capital is on the table. And so I think that what we really need to do is we do need to be very vigilant in our government relations and about what needs to be assessed. And even when giving out licenses. So to Vivian's point on diversity, do you think that diversity was one of the criteria when considering licenses? No, Do you think that rural economic development was one of their criteria, or sustainable cultivation, or low energy impact? No, it wasn't. And yet government has ministerial mandates of which there is no cohesion whatsoever between the objectives of each department. And I think that this is a lost opportunity. And so I think that we do need to sort of consider this as if we're looking for what is the most impactful way to really see that groundswell of change. These are the kinds of pressures that we need to be applying in order to affect on a macro level access to, hundreds of millions of dollars, as opposed to $10,000 and $15,000 grants, which are often earmarked for women and diversity portfolios. And so that's the lens I think that we want to elevate, or certainly that's sort of where we're focusing our next wave of energy is on a macro level.
That's a great target to be looking at. We've got about a minute and a half left. So I just want to quickly touch on Wendy. Those are excellent points, Myrna. I love the raising it up even to the government. Wendy, just a little, maybe second last word to you and then last word to Katie. How do you see those ideals being reflected as we move forward in terms of what you'd like to see in terms of the industry changing and what we've been talking about?
Well, I would love to build that future. And as a storyteller, those are exactly the types of stories that I want to tell. And those are the stories that I want to see as a consumer. So, I mean, we released Mary Jane's The Women of Weed Worldwide. We also have a special discount for everybody at WWC, and hopefully that's dropped in the chat, but we're offering everybody a 10% discount through Sunday. And honestly, what I'm working on right now is pitching a follow-up. Okay. I would love to keep telling stories about women in this space because it's exactly the inspiring work that I think more people need to see and hear about.
I agree. I think this leadership discussion has been a great idea generator. And final word over to Katie Miller from Flow, who sponsored this talk today. So thank you very much, Katie. And Katie, what's your final advice on what you'd give to women who are trying to evolve in the industry in their own way?
Thank you, Myrna. Thank you, all the panelists. It's been great to be a part of the conference. And yeah, final thoughts would be to build out that personal vision and your personal values and be committed to it, doggedly committed. Consider that the only lens that really matters for you and allow everyone else to have their own outside of that.
Okay, great. Well, I just want to thank Myrna for your insight and Wendy for the film discussion. Vivian, honestly, your whole story about making things authentic in 200 years, and Kyra, honestly, it's been a fabulous talk. We've gone way over time, so sorry about that, but thank you, thank you, thank you.